How can you have policemen? Paris principles, you should be independent. 80% of the complaints against the policemen, how can you have policemen? And then the judge deferred, and then Justice Dharmadi gave a very brilliant judgment saying, yeah, no problem having policemen. And today, as a result of that one decision of Justice Dharmadhikari, today the national and state human rights commissions are flooded with policemen. Flooded! And we have policemen heading, acting chairpersons of human rights commissions. Can you imagine? So therefore the Human Rights Commission, you may as well close down. You've got policemen flooded everywhere. National Human Rights Commission also. And when you go for investigations, you won't take your civil society members. We have a core group. I'm supposed to be, I think, part of the... You have a core group. You won't take your core group of activists with you. No? Below the dignity of an institution to send an activist to investigate. Why? So your policeman will go and give a clean chit to everything. So that's the reason, sir. Nothing personal in this, sir. Nothing personal. I tell you, you're very extraordinary in the presentation that you make. But the institution itself is absolutely defunct. And how did it come in the Manipur case? Nandini, to answer your question and quickly stop. The pleadings, our pleadings in the Manipur case is that the NHRC is asleep. 1,335 killings and disappearances, and the NHRC has done nothing. They plead 19, Section 19, we can't do anything. Forget Section 19, just go to the area for God's sake. Killing has taken place, it's come on TV, it's come on all the national newspapers, shooting a person in a chemist shop in broad daylight. He's hiding in the chemist shop, you pick out your gun and shoot him dead. Visit the place and say what's happening. That's all. Don't make a report. Don't do anything. Just visit the place. And put an end to this nonsense of killing and killing and killing. But no. Enjoying the perks of office and, resting in Delhi and doing all this kind of stuff. It's time. It's time that we really look at these institutions that are supposed to protect us and ask for radical reformation of the system. Radical change of these institutions.
But in all the encounters, we successfully stopped the NHRC and we caught the policemen.
It is either the occasion or the forum for me to launch into an impassioned defense of the institution on which I presently serve. I just want to make a couple of points. Firstly, the NHRC, like any other institution in India, is a flawed and imperfect institution. I think none of us who served on it deludes ourselves into believing that what we do is fantastic. We work within our means, within our limitations. I also think that we need to bear in mind the totality of the problems that we have to deal with in India. As I said at the outset, these encounter killings are absolutely grotesque because they are the worst manifestation of the abuse of state power. But I think Mr. Gonsalves is being very unfair to us when he says that we sort of stick to the comfort of Delhi, because we do not. We go out into the field, and what we try to do is to look at all the problems that constitute the broad range of human rights violations. And as I said, the number of people who are dying from starvation, those who are still ill-treated because they are born to the wrong caste, these run into the millions, not into the hundreds, which you have in the case of encounter killings. So whereas we absolutely have to place emphasis on the particularly grave and heinous nature of the crime of encounter killings, we cannot lose sight of the other, broader picture, which we must. I also want to say that when I speak, it is not that I say these things because I don't mind saying these in public, but because my colleagues and I, those who are presently on the Commission and I, actually believe this, that this is what the NHRC needs to do. Perhaps because of my background, have no difficulty in saying this openly. But that is not to say that I am an exception in the Commission. And therefore I accept, as it were, the criticism, but I also want you to understand that part of the criticism is misplaced. To answer the questions, have we asked for an amendment to the Protection of Human Rights Act? There was a committee set up some years back, headed by Justice Ahmadi, which made a series of sweeping recommendations to the Government of India, most of which the Government of India did not accept. What we have now done, so Section 19, which sadly does impose very serious limitations on us vis-à-vis the armed forces, that continues to exist. What we have done, in another case in which I think Mr. Gonsalves is involved, involving the killings by the BSF on the Bangladesh border, which again, like in Manipur, run into the hundreds. On that case, again the NHRC being a respondent, in our affidavit, we have spelled out the limitations that Section 19 imposes and have asked the court to read down the provisions of Section 19. So as long as the Act is not amended, at least if we get a judicial interpretation that dilutes the provisions of Section 19, that would be helpful. Because at the moment what happens is, as and when we do make a recommendation or ask for documents or ask for an investigation that is strictly speaking not permissible under Section 19, the armed force, the security forces resist. On AFSPA, as I said, our two official open pronouncements have been the ones that I mentioned when the case was first heard in the Supreme Court. And I think the view, that was years ago, I think the view then taken was that we had made our views known in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court having upheld its constitutional validity, we had not thereafter gone back again. But as I said in our presentation to the United Nations Human Rights Council, we have again drawn attention to the evil effects of AFSPA. On Chhattisgarh, again, being a member of the Commission, I am bound by what the Commission decided. This particular inquiry report was submitted before I joined the Commission. So I have seen it, I have read it, but I was not party or privy to the discussions in which it was accepted. Now, answering both your point and the point that Mr. Gonsalves made, when you have to have investigations conducted, your best investigators are policemen. It's policemen who established that policemen were at fault in Gujarat. It's policemen who have, in the NHRC, established in hundreds of cases through their analyses that encounters were false. We do not have that expertise. So one must not tar all policemen with the same brush. We have here a gentleman who says he's from the IPS and a human rights activist. And we have seen in the NHRC extremely dedicated police officers, as I said, without whose analyses of reports sent by their brother police officers, we would not have been able to establish in so many cases that the encounters were fake. So therefore, when police officers submit their reports, those who work on deputation with us, we do not ab initio reject them as biased. On this particular case, on Chhattisgarh, when I read the report and then when I read the extremely serious criticisms of it that also appeared in the media, I called the officers who were still, some of them were still with us on deputation, and I asked them what their views on this were. if they still stood by what they had said. They confirmed that some of those who were their escorts were SPOs. And I know it is a view that one or two of those SPOs were in fact those against whom serious charges had been made. And so therefore, they themselves knew that they had factored that into their recommendations to us. But they all stood by their views, and it is not that they had based themselves only in the city of Dantewada. They had actually gone, as you perhaps know, into the field, into the bush. They had, in fact, on 2 occasions also come under fire from the Naxalites. No, I know that there is always a fair amount of skepticism on this, but I think we need to be very clear in our minds, and I'll say this with the deepest humility to all members of civil society whom I hold in the highest respect. In situations like Chhattisgarh, where we have just visited from the Commission, when we went from Raipur to Dantewada, we specifically also wanted to go to these 3 villages, Morapalli and the other 2, I don't quite remember the names. And we were told by the DGP that he would have to deploy 1,500 policemen to protect us, and we would be helicoptered in there. Because he said that is what they had to do to try to protect the CBI who had recently tried to go there. We refused to go because we said with 1,500 policemen, the only people who would be left would be those who are police informers, and there's no point in our going there to meet them. Nor is there any point in descending in a helicopter into a village. But when we asked the local journalists how they managed to go to these areas, some of them confessed that they had to seek the help of the Naxalite cadres. So sadly, it is the case that anyone who goes with any sort of official character, even though the NHRC is not part of government, we are seen as this quasi-official body. You go under the protection of the police, or we go under the protection of the police, and therefore those we see are those whom the police want us to see. The journalists who go there very often go there only under the protection of the Naxalites, can only go there under the protection of the Naxalites, and only hear the other point of view. So it is immensely difficult to know exactly what is going on there. But with all of those caveats, we still completely take your point that the government of Chhattisgarh has much to answer for. It has some very bright and dedicated young officers